After Monday's transgender shooter murdered his ex-wife and son, injuring 3 more at a high school hockey game in Rhode Island, the Pawtucket Police Chief Tina Gonzalez said the shooter's gender status has nothing to do with the shooting or the investigation.
We have identified the person, the suspect, by a birth name. The birth name was Robert Dorgan. We have also learned that the person does go by the name of Roberta, also uses a last name of Esposito. As to their status, that really doesn't have anything to do with the investigation.
The city of Nashville and the nation are reeling from the shooting yesterday at a Christian school that killed 6 people, including 3 children. Police shot and killed the attacker, identified as a transgender female who once attended the school.
It was just a mass shooting in Rhode Island yesterday that I mentioned at the top of the show by a trans person, a man claiming that he was female.
Copy that. Here we go. All right, this is getting serious. Oh my goodness. Oh, wow.
The 3rd precinct of the Minneapolis Police Department, on fire. Nearby businesses blaze. This is how the night of May 28th unfolded. George Floyd's arrest and death in police custody on Monday set off protests in the Twin Cities. The protesters are demanding that criminal charges be brought against the officers involved.
Yo, what is good, YouTube? Welcome back to another episode of The Conservative Libertarian. All right, today we got Mr. Rubio, Big Marco, right? We got Big Rubio. Now, out of everyone in Trump's cabinet, I like JD. JD's cool, but you know, I love Rubio. Something about Rubio is just like he understands how to meet the moment. Like he knows when to have these conversations. He knows when to put himself in areas where he can succeed. He's very good at talking. He's a very good communicator, and I think that's why Trump's administration, even though it's getting a lot of flack from a lot of what it's been doing, when it comes to the ICE raids, the war, and a lot of inflation and just everyday living expenses that Americans have to go through. You know what I'm saying? It's nice to see that there's somebody in the administration that has somewhat of a level head. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying I agree with Marco on everything he says, but there's people out there that want to dismiss or not even outright call out the violence that's going on the left, and it shows a lot in how they act, they operate, you know what I'm saying, who they celebrate, who they don't celebrate. And Marco Rubio is going to call this out at the resurgence of political terrorism. I guess this is like an area where they talk about political terrorism, basically, I guess. He's gonna basically make his address and make his statement that we are experiencing a rise in far left political terrorism that we haven't seen in a while. So let's get into what Marco has to say, and let's get right into it. Let's go.
It is the reason why here in my country so many people in positions of power have repeatedly dismissed acts of violence and even terrorism as legitimate forms of political expression, so long as they served a left-wing cause. It is why during those so-called George Floyd riots in the summer of 2020, as criminals and extremists burned and looted their way through America's great cities and nearly brought the country to its knees, city governments all across the country simply refused to prosecute the people conducting these acts of violence and terror. It is the reason for the now infamous image, maybe you all recall this, of a news anchor from a very prominent agency, a news anchor standing in a neighborhood consumed in flames. Meanwhile, the chyron on the bottom read that the protests were mostly peaceful. This was something worse than a double standard. Left-wing violence was not just excused, it was treated as sacrosanct, a protected class unto itself. That era has to end. The coalition in this room today includes political leaders and experts and law enforcement officials from more than 60 countries across the world. You have come here from a wide range of governments, parties, and political persuasions. Some of your governments and ours disagree publicly. Sometimes we disagree sharply about trade, about energy, about immigration. You did not come here today because you have been persuaded on every single aspect of the American view of the world. You came here. You are here because 2 weeks ago, a 72-year-old woman was burned on over 80% of her body in her own home in Greece, and she died, executed by a firebomb because her daughter dared to stand for office. You are here today because for 5 days this winter, the lights went out in Berlin, the longest blackout in the city since the Second World War, sparked by an attack that left tens of thousands of households without power in the freezing cold and left an 83-year-old woman dead. You are here and you came because a month after that Berlin blackout, a French 23-year-old succumbed to traumatic brain injuries, beaten to death on the streets of Lyon by a group of far-left militant thugs. You are here because your political leaders are being attacked and stabbed and shot in your streets, because your businesses have been bombed, because your railways have been sabotaged, because your police officers have been beaten and burned. You are here because this is real, and it is getting worse, and it can no longer be denied, and it can no longer be ignored, because it is time to crush this evil forever. The simple fact is, none of this that I've just described is new. Far-left political terrorism is not a recent-day modern novelty. It is not a fiction manufactured by conservative politicians. For most of the modern era, it was in fact the dominant form of political violence. Every one of our friends here from the nations of the Western Hemisphere remember the decades of kidnappings and bombings and assassinations and executions, the violent terror of the Tupamaros, of the Monteseros, of the FARC,
Must be tough
of the
words to
ELN.
pronounce.
You remember the inhuman savagery of Peru's
Goddamn.
Shining Path, the Maoist fanatics who massacred the peasant villages of Peru, hacking pregnant women and newborn infants to death with axes and machetes. You remember the tens of thousands of Marxist guerrillas trained to kill in Castro's terrorist camps. All of you here from Europe remember. You remember the machine gun massacres of Italy's Red Brigades, which held the 5-time prime minister captive for 55 days before subjecting him to a revolutionary so-called people's trial and executing him in 1978. You remember the Red Army faction's nearly 3-decade campaign of bombings, kidnappings, and assassinations in Germany, murdering dozens and injuring hundreds more. You remember the 17 November organization in Greece, the Marxist extremists that terrorized Athens for more than a quarter century, including, by the way, shooting my country's CIA station chief dead outside of his home, in front of his wife, as they were returning home from a Christmas party. And here in America, we remember. We remember the same reign of deadly terror, justified by the same slogans, motivated by the same wicked ideas. We remember the Weather Underground, which bombed the Pentagon, which bombed the State Department, and bombed the Capitol. We remember the Black Liberation Army, which staged armed robberies and executed police officers at point-blank range. We remember the Symbionese Liberation Army, which shot a public school superintendent to death with cyanide-packed hollow point bullets.
That sounds awful.
In one
Holy
18-month
shit.
period, between 1971
Holy shit.
and 1972, the FBI counted some 2,500 bombings on American soil, a rate of nearly 5 a day. The overwhelming share of that violence came from left-wing extremists. Between 1970 and 1980, 93% of terrorist attacks in the West came from the far extremist left. These are numbers that would shock most Americans today because we've been taught to believe that this kind of political violence, it simply doesn't exist or it's being exaggerated. But it
Yeah, and I want to pause it there. I know I let it run for a little bit because I really wanted him to like actually talk and get his perspective out of what he means. And yes, like I said, there has been an attempt to basically downplay left-wing extremist violence. You know what I'm saying? You could just see it on CNN, especially after the murder of Charlie Kirk. It was disgusting what they were saying, that we don't know the motive and we don't, and you know what I'm saying, there's no motive yet, so we shouldn't be jumping to conclusions. And yeah. But let a right-wing, extremists, go out and shoot up a black church. Oh, we definitely know why he did that. You know what I'm saying? It was obvious why Charlie Kirk got assassinated. It was obvious why certain politicians get assassinated. It's obvious why the healthcare CEO, got assassinated. It's obvious. And also in these most recent school shootings, there was that one, I think it was I'm not trying to get this wrong, but I want to say it was Illinois or something like that. It was one of those, it was a state that, this girl went on, I think she was trans or whatever, but she went on a rampage in the school, killing some students and some teachers. It was awful what happened. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, a lot of times when the media is talking about these situations, or they're trying to explain what's happening or why it's happening, they are trying to slowly not integrate the fact that these people believe in left-wing ideologies. You know what I'm saying? Trans people, I'm not saying trans people can't be on the right, but the fight for trans rights is specifically on the liberal side and the Democratic side. So if it's coming from that side of the aisle, then it's a left-wing person that is committing the violence. You know what I'm saying? They believe in whatever they believe in, and they think violence is justified in their means. Like I said, it's awful. And like what he brought up when he came to the George Floyd riots and stuff like that, like the media was saying that most of these riots are peaceful, but we have buildings literally being burned down. They did it even when in the No King's Days rallies. You know what I'm saying? They said that most of these rallies are peaceful, but they got people stomping on cars, throwing bricks at ICE vehicles, or assumed ICE vehicles. They have people lighting fireworks in neighborhoods and residential neighborhoods where people are trying to sleep and just get away from all this political this polarized political landscape and just live their lives. But you have the left outside their homes telling them that they can't sleep because their rights are important too. It's definitely an issue that people don't want to address head on, because they don't want to outright label the left as violent. Because once you start labeling people as violent, then people believe violence is good in return. And you know what I'm saying? And that's why they don't want to do that. They don't want especially because most people who vote left, typically are black, brown, or of that descent, and they don't want violence being brought upon them, which I don't think any Republican or conservative, at least me as a conservative libertarian, I don't promote violence. I hate violence. I'm not a pacifist, but I'm just not I'm not interested in violence. You know what I'm saying? It's just not something that I want to partake in. So, but let's get back into this.
It does exist, and we're actually underestimating it. And our nations bear the scars to prove it. And today we face a new wave of this old evil. Here in the United States, the share of left-wing terrorist attacks and plots has risen to levels not seen in decades. In Germany, far-left violence has jumped by more than 40% in just the last year alone. In Greece, more than 80% of radical violence is now driven by far-left and anarchist actors. These are not abstract statistics. Americans have seen what those numbers mean. An all-out assault on our immigration officers, sniper attacks, explosives, armed ambushes, a transgender shooter opening fire on Catholic elementary school students as they pray, his gun marked with slogans like, "Where is your God now?"
That's the person that I was talking about. I guess I didn't remember what state it was in, but I remember that happened, and it was just awful.
A healthcare executive executed in cold blood in the streets. Multiple assassination attempts on a sitting president, and the murder of the greatest conservative activist of a generation, a man who happened to also be a husband and the father of 2 young children, shot and killed while speaking to a crowd of students. This is a distinctive and unique evil. It has always been driven by a hatred, above all else, a hatred for civilization itself. It is a revolt of the worst against the best, a revolt of the weak and the cowardly against the strong and the good. It is perpetrated by those who cannot build, who cannot create, who cannot achieve great things, and take their revenge upon the world for their own inadequacy by seeking to destroy those who can. This is what radical leftism is. It may wear various different slogans and ideologies across place and time. They can call themselves anti-capitalist or anti-imperialist or communist or anarchist or Marxist, but the fundamental character is always the same. It's always the same. It is a poisonous resentment cloaked in the language of equality and justice and liberation, an overwhelming need to tear down what greater men have built, to wreck what is beautiful and what is right on behalf of people who are only filled with ugliness and have nothing else to offer the world. Through violence and through terror, they once again seek to impose their ugliness on all of us. The old dogma was wrong. The old dogma was wrong. None of this is driven by idealism. It is not utopian. In fact, it is the opposite. One of the criticisms you sometimes hear of communism, for example, is that it sounds good in theory, but it never works in practice. That's actually not true. Communism does not sound good in theory. The world it envisions for all of us is small, flat, gray, leveled of all exception, drained of all that is good and noble in the human soul. The world it envisions is a world without courage, a world without creativity or ambition, a world without heroes or glory or great causes to strive towards, a world without miracles, without myths, without men who rise above the rest to do incredible and extraordinary things. And the world communism envisions is a world without God. For these architects of revolutionary violence, the towering achievement of our civilization, for them, it's an unbearable humiliation, a reminder of what they cannot do, and a reminder of what they cannot be.
All right, I'm not gonna watch the whole thing. This thing's like another like 20 minutes long. So, but yeah, like I said, Marco Rubio is such a great speaker. Like he is really good at communicating and getting his point across, and pointing out statistics and data. You know what I'm saying, to get his point across. And it's like I said, I'm glad Trump has him, you know what I'm saying, out of all the people that are in his cabinet, you know what I'm saying, Marco's probably the best pick, okay? Probably your best pick, Trump, because this guy knows what he's talking about. And all this radicalization and the polarization that's going on in the country is not good for none of us. You know what I'm saying, whether you're right or left, you know what I'm saying, we need to stay focused on what matters, people, on what matters. And yeah, with that, I will catch you guys in the next one. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. And yeah, see you guys later. Peace.